Just a little disclaimer before we get into this video. I was hit with a lot of unfortunate copyright flags blocking my video, and disputing these claims has led to nothing. So I've been forced to butcher my work for the sake of actually allowing people to see it. I really tried to avoid using some silly TV or monitor, but I've quite literally been left with no choice. However, this is not the only version of this video I'm going to be putting out here. I've gone ahead and uploaded the originally intended version to my new Patreon for free. You can find the link in both the pinned comment and in the description. Overall, my words matter more than the video itself, but I'd still rather people see how I wanted it to look instead of what it's become. Also, just a final tip, preserve your anonymity on Patreon. It's really easy to accidentally allow a creator to see your email. Make sure to turn it off by going to Settings, Privacy, hitting the edit button next to Creator Email Sharing, and then just adjusting as you please. Again, sorry. Hello and welcome to Glazing Media, the series where I analyze, praise, and critique my favorite pieces of media that I otherwise wouldn't get to talk about. Today's media to glaze is Cory Barker's Obsession. A few weeks back, I watched Obsession for the first time, and, well, I'm obsessed. Seriously, this movie blew me away. I cannot stop thinking about it. It's enveloping everything in my brain space right now like someone wished that I loved Obsession more than anything else in the fucking world. I kept telling myself, no. I won't be making a video on this because I don't think I really have anything to add that hasn't already been said, but I don't care. I really want to talk about this movie, and Glazing Media literally exists for this very reason. Anyways, let's jump in. Bear is the big discussion point of the movie. At the beginning, they trick you into sympathizing with him, and then he proceeds to make awful choices. Unfortunately, some people are giving Bear more credit than he deserves. I'm sick of seeing people arguing he didn't know the wish worked until the dinner scene. He doesn't have blatant confirmation, sure, but he's not nearly as naive as people paint him to be. The minute Nikki starts acting weird after the wish is made, he glances back at the willow. Clearly, a part of him is considering the potential that it's real. He also doesn't stop there. He researches if the willow actually works. He gets mixed answers, but the fact that he actually looked it up is indicative to me that deep down he already has a hunch that it worked. However, a guy like Bear doesn't want to admit he's a bad person. Accepting the wish worked would force him to sit with that and break the fantasy he wants to live with Nikki. Actually, let's forget the wish for a moment. Even without confirmation, Bear still makes inexcusable choices where the willow isn't even a factor. The first night Nikki stays over is the first implication that he's not as good as he seems. She begins kissing him, and it's important that he isn't the one to stop this interaction. The only reason it ended was because Nikki freaked out. Had she not, things probably would have progressed further. He's clearly taking advantage of her. She appeared to be altered in some way, a fact that he literally calls out. She's simply not in a position to consent, and it's his responsibility to shut down any sort of sexual activity, but he doesn't. If he really loved Nikki, he would have stopped this. Even before the wish, his actions are kinda questionable. There's nothing wrong with his crush, it's just how he acts upon it. He'll stare at her Instagram posts all day and begin to build up an incomplete, unrealistic narrative that she's the perfect girl without really putting in the effort to know her. We can see this when they discuss Nikki's aspirations to be a writer. He really hyper-focuses on the idea that her book is a romance, despite her insisting it's actually a love story. His fixation on romance is a subtle indicator of his disinterest in Nikki as a person. He's too focused on romanticizing the idea of her, not the details of who she actually is. This disinterest is hit pretty hard when he calls her Freaky Nikki. He disregards her negative feelings toward the name and uses it to try to gain her attention. He's a frustrating character that makes a series of bad decisions. The first being his refusal to admit his feelings to Nikki when she quite literally asks him. Personally, I think there may have been potential for an organic relationship. If we take the small insights the film gives us on how Nikki feels about relationships, it makes sense. One of the core parts of her character are poor relationships. She has a rocky relationship with her dad, potentially the last family she's got left. It sort of leaves this hole in her life, a yearning for connection that she can never have, and so she leans on Ian. Unfortunately, it's safe to assume that Ian is an incredibly emotionally closed off guy, which I think is indicated when Nikki says,
"You know, you're the only person that I get to really talk to about this stuff, especially at work. You're not a complete brick wall."
This leads into the last part of my argument. Bear isn't emotionally closed off. Nikki has a kind of connection with him. I think a part of her would have been willing to give it a shot, but they'd ultimately realize that they're not at all compatible in a romantic relationship. At the end of the day though, there's never really going to be a definitive answer as to whether a relationship was on the table, because, well, it doesn't matter. He was too much of a coward to find that out. Bear lives in this cycle of avoiding responsibility, which links into a more subtle part of his characterization, one that recontextualizes the wish and his overall character. It's shown a handful of times that Bear uses AI. He engages with a chatbot and enjoys AI memes. It creates this idea that he's lazy, doesn't enjoy thinking for himself, is only interested in taking shortcuts. With this detail in mind, his constant denial of Wish Nikki's situation becomes all the more effective. The wish itself was the shortcut of all shortcuts. Any effort into getting to know her becomes irrelevant. It's a quick and lazy way to create the illusion of connection. I find it interesting that Wish Nikki somewhat mimics the behavior of an AI chatbot. I'm definitely not the first person to present this connection either. Wish Nikki distracts him from the fragility of their relationship. She constantly confesses her love for him, telling him exactly what he wants to hear, just like a chatbot. He can ignore the responsibility of her situation and continue taking advantage of her because she's telling him that it's okay. He uses her to permit this constant cycle of denial and abuse, leading to the slow devolution of his character and revealing his insidiousness. One of the most frustrating points for Bear is the phone call to the One Wish Willow hotline. He requests to alter his wish. This specific detail of altering exposes his selfishness. He's unwilling to release Nikki from torture that he knows is happening because he'd wind up unhappy. This is the girl of his dreams, and she's there to fulfill his every need, so he's not going to give that up. Their dynamic is such an interesting way of portraying abuse on screen. It's unique, but still maintains the standard ideas of domestic abuse. The victim is stripped of any personality or autonomy by the abuser and cut off from the outside world. She's a prisoner to him, and is expected to have sex with him whenever he wants. There also exists this massive power imbalance. If Bear wants something, he'll get it. Nikki, on the other hand, isn't even allowed to want anything because he stole that from her. When there's not a power imbalance, there's a love imbalance. It's rare to see the love they have for each other match. There is true equilibrium for a while, and that's both times that Love Is in the Air plays. However, for the majority of the film, Bear loves real Nikki far more than she does, and Wish Nikki loves Bear far more than he does. This imbalance destroys Wish Nikki and leads to the unraveling of their relationship. I've been pleasantly surprised by the response to this relationship online. There's pretty big condemnation of Bear, as well as great sympathy for Nikki. Too often in fiction do I see male abusers be uplifted and female victims be put down. The way that people talk about Skylar White is absolutely disgusting, and I'm never forgiving the internet for that one. I think that Bear's ending is utterly perfect. He finally decides it's time to cancel the wish only after things become too inconvenient for him. Wish Nikki is cursed to love Bear more than herself, but he isn't. In the end, he's still mad at more. He can't take his own life, and attempts to undo it, but the wish takes effect. It encapsulates all we've learned about Bear and makes sure not to put him on a pedestal. If we didn't witness him attempt to throw up, I think people may have potentially seen Bear's suicide as heroic. It's a big issue that some medias face when it comes to killing off objectively evil characters. In their final acts, these awful people are raised in saintly, emotional ways. Bear's death is anything but that. It solidifies him as the villain. I also love how there's no mourning of Bear. Once the real Nikki snaps into place, she just pushes him off, showing the same level of respect that he gave her. Also, according to interviews, this ending for Bear was actually unscripted and pitched by Michael Johnston during filming.
We did a version. It was excellent. I remember they said cut, and I was like, wait, my idea was for Bear to change his mind in the last second. Just that last moment. I told him, and he was like, roll.
The second major discussion point surrounding this movie is, what is Wish Nikki really? Some people suspect she's a demon, a spirit, some even going to lengths to piece together this intricate theory that she's been possessed by Bear's dead cat. These are all really fun ideas, especially the cat theory, but personally, I disagree. The movie very intentionally keeps us within Bear's narrative. I interpret Wish Nikki to be a reflection of this narrative. Everything he knows, she knows. Bear didn't know about her relationship with her dad, explaining why Wish Nikki's reaction was so strong when he calls her out on it. She simply couldn't have known that she was lying. The big issue here is that Bear doesn't really know much about Nikki. He's created this romanticized idea of her. She's boxed in, forced to fit this idea. She will consistently change herself to be what he wants. He wants her to be beautiful, so she exemplifies that beauty by wearing this red dress. We may have only seen real Nikki wear one outfit, but this is a major change. Real Nikki's outfit was subtle and didn't demand attention. Wish Nikki's are the opposite. There's a lot of red in her color palette, an eye-catching color associated with lust, one she'll consistently use to steal Bear's attention. She's always trying to stay beautiful for him. There's no limit to it either. Bear's potential attraction to Sarah forces Wish Nikki to change herself so drastically. She wears Sarah's dress, covers herself in tattoos, and even takes up smoking. The harm she's doing to herself is irrelevant as long as he's satisfied. There's almost a complete lack of awareness over her own body, and I think it's noteworthy that once Bear discovers Nikki covered in her own waste, she's quick to wash herself off only after he is disgusted by her. And I think this links into an interesting idea for Wish Nikki. There are a few moments that experiment with this idea of her being impermanent, the most obvious being the smile scene. This is the only time we ever actually leave Bear's perspective. She throws up and goes to the bathroom all over herself, seemingly not even registering what's going on. This ties back into her being a reflection of Bear's narrative. He's a completely selfish person, so naturally, the concept of Sonder is lost on him. So, how can she continue when he hasn't even created a life for her outside of him? Short answer, she can't. Her monologue later in the movie heavily emphasizes this idea. Bear wants them to be apart, just for one night, but she won't accept it. She discusses an unbearable, agonizing experience where she'll lose all feeling and slide into nothingness without him by her side. It's not an over-exaggeration either. She was created to love Bear more than anyone. Life without him is no life at all. Nothing is secondary because she doesn't know how to live any other way. The most heartbreaking feature of Nikki's character is this constant battle for control. I don't imagine that real Nikki is locked away having these occasional moments of consciousness. Unfortunately, I think it's the opposite. She's pushed down by the force of the willow and has no choice but to be a passenger to the atrocities. The proof lies in the flashes we see of real Nikki. Sure, in the beginning, she jumps back and it feels like she's just gained this sudden awareness, but I don't think that's quite what it is. To have no control over yourself must feel like a nightmare, and I believe initially that's what real Nikki thought it was. So when she gains these momentary instances of control, she recoils back in this natural fear response because the nightmare feels so real. Eventually, she's forced to accept this situation as her new reality. Her suicide attempt at the party is the strongest indicator of passenger theory. For a moment, the willow stops forcing her down. She recoils from Bear, the man she's come to fear because of the unimaginable violations against her. She's so quick to hurt herself while pleading with the others that it's not really her. It's the most desperate attempt she'll ever make for her suffering to come to an end. I think if real Nikki only existed in these tiny flashes, she wouldn't have had such an extreme reaction since Wish Nikki dominates her body. Her first act being self-harm is protesting against her new reality. She needs to die and doesn't care what she has to do to make it happen. This constant battle for control makes me feel sympathy for Wish Nikki too. It's not her fault that real Nikki resists against her. Bear stole both their rights for autonomy. Real Nikki's takeovers make Bear view Wish Nikki differently, which utterly crushes her. She's such a fundamentally broken character because of Bear's refusal to admit she's different. Just as he did with real Nikki, he tries to force Wish Nikki into this box, wanting her to just be Nikki. The fact remains, she can't be. Bear's narrative has barely equipped her with anything. She has such a limited understanding. She doesn't know right from wrong. She cooks the cat because Bear loves his cat, so obviously he's gonna love that. It's like a toddler's been forced into an adult's body. Wish Nikki has the naivete of a child, which is expressed through her physicality. She throws tantrums when she's accused of lying. She pouts when she's upset. Even her cries are childlike. She tilts her head back and just wails into the sky. It makes Bear's grip over her all the more uncomfortable. Both Nikki's endings are crushing. Wish Nikki is forced to grapple with the reality that her love isn't mutual, no matter how badly she destroys herself. The only thing able to balance their love is her wish, and it's so quickly ripped away from her. The final moments of her existence are just pain as she watches the reason for it die in her arms. Originally, it was scripted that Nikki would take her own life at the end. In fact, they even shot it. I'm so incredibly glad that they didn't go that route for the final product. Nikki's wails over the credits make for a far more impactful and hopeful ending. It's bleak for sure, but at least this way she has a chance to persevere and live in spite of all her trauma, as well as live for herself again. At the end of the story, there were two victims. Real Nikki and Wish Nikki, forced into a losing battle all because of Bear's unwavering selfishness. Ian and Sarah serve to highlight a different perspective in this story, and for the little screen time they both have, it's quite effective. As the film progresses, we're able to learn a little more about both these characters, and it highlights the inherent selfishness and dysfunctionality of the friend group as a whole. I'm gonna come right out and say it. These people probably shouldn't be friends. As one of those groups that were great friends in school, but have kind of outgrown each other, there is still genuine chemistry in this group, but it's gotten to the point where everyone is kind of just working against each other to serve their own interests, and it really just doesn't work as a healthy dynamic. Ian is the closest thing to a number 2 villain in the story, although I say that incredibly lightly. He's a dickhead, sure, but people branding him as a villain is a bit of a stretch to me. There's nothing inherently wrong with him hooking up with Nikki, nor is it a bad thing that he concealed it from Bear. That does change a little depending on the information Ian was privy to. If he knew of Bear's infatuation beforehand, then he falls into dickhead territory, but he's not really a villain for it. At the end of the day, these are two consenting adults in what is said to be a casual, non-romantic situation. The worst thing he does is mislead and sabotage Bear's chances with Nikki. He gives him pretty terrible advice, doubling down on the selfishness of this group. His schemes feel riddled with jealousy. From an outside perspective, Bear makes Nikki happy, something that Ian was incapable of. I assume that he felt more for Nikki than he was capable of showing due to his emotional unavailability. It feels possessive of him to try to block Nikki's chances of happiness, and he is pretty shitty for attempting to alienate her midway through the story. He pitches a boys' night, trying to separate Bear from Nikki, but it's not really a boys' night at all. Sarah and a couple other women are also hanging out at this place. Something is clearly wrong with Nikki, as the wish morphs her into a seemingly different person. Instead of showing concern, he grows frustrated with her for being with Bear and shuts her out from the group hang. There's almost a complete lack of care in this group, hammering home their dysfunctionality. There's very mild concern shown for Nikki. It doesn't really seem like anyone is checking in on her, despite it being clear that she's going through something. Even when she self-harms, it doesn't really seem like anyone is willing to offer help. It's one of the things that makes me feel even worse for Nikki. Everyone failed her. The lion's share of the blame obviously goes to Bear, but the rest of the group's actions shouldn't be forgotten. Even Sarah, seemingly the most innocent of the quad, has her moments of being kind of a shitty friend. Sure, she shows some concern for Nikki after the party scene, but kinda just brushes that aside and makes this incorrect judgment about the situation. She assumes Nikki is using Bear to hurt Ian, neglecting to show her the concern she deserves. I guess she's a bit biased as her crush on Bear sort of blinds her to the truth, but the whole "I was to your left" thing makes her come across as shitty here. It definitely feels like moments away from cheating. Obviously, Bear would still be the shittier person if he did make a move, but Sarah shouldn't get a pass as she knows he's in a relationship. Aside from Nikki, Sarah is still the most sympathetic person in the group. She doesn't really do anything insanely wrong here, but it still highlights this group's dysfunctionality that even the innocent are corrupted. Although, I don't really want to be that harsh on Sarah anyways, seeing as she got her head smashed in and all. So fucking brutal, by the way. She deserved better. I wasn't even intending to talk about this, but I just read the screenplay for Obsession, and holy fuck. I'll link it in the description, but truthfully, it's an awful read. I acknowledge it's probably a really early version of the movie, just to sell to financiers or something. It's mostly the same, so I'm only gonna go over a handful of things. There was a lot of material added for the movie. Wish Nikki's decline is almost instantaneous, and a lot of her insanity was yet to be written. She doesn't do the tape door, nor does she cook the cat. She very quickly goes from 0 to 100 when she kills Sarah. Even though I knew it was coming, it was a much more sudden development for a character, as her craziness was pretty limited. I think they made Bear a lot more sinister in the script, but maybe that's just because we have this glimpse into his psyche. There's a very intense essay scene where real Nikki momentarily regains control, and it's described as an inconvenience to him. He remains eerily calm until Wish Nikki returns. It's so fucking disturbing and not a one-time instance. They pretty strongly highlight Bear's lack of care for Nikki, with Wish Nikki telling him things like, if you loved Nikki the way Nikki was, Nikki wouldn't have changed for you. I actually quite like that line and wish they kept it for the final product, but I think the subtext tells you pretty much the same thing. Also, the One Wish Willow hotline call never exists in the screenplay. While I appreciate the addition, its absence removes any confusion over the selfishness of Bear's suicide, because he didn't even know the wish would break. I suppose that's another thing. Wish Nikki takes her own life at the end because she can't live without Bear. So I'm not even sure if the whole you die and the wish is broken thing was even a factor in this version. Anyways, I'm not going to linger on this one any longer. If you're curious, check it out, but be warned, it's a heavy read. Alrighty. I'm going to use this little bonus segment to glaze all the little things in the movie that didn't really fit into my actual analyses of the characters. This movie has stuck with me incredibly well, despite only having watched it one time. Some of the scenes are burned into my brain. I can't stop thinking about them. I think what's made me so obsessed with this movie is the fact that it freaked me out. I consider myself to have a strong tolerance for horror, so it's incredibly rare that something will actually freak me out. A big part of this is the horror of humanity. I find ethereal creatures to be really uninteresting, and it's a much more compelling story when you're constantly with your monster in the way Obsession does it. For some movies, minimal monster timing works, but because Obsession is all humans, it's much better to see them as long as possible. It really allowed the story to flow in a much smoother way as we watched Wish Nikki gradually break apart. The main reason as to why I love this movie so much is it's simple while still maintaining complexity to it. There aren't really any crazy twists and turns. It's a fairly straightforward narrative that doesn't get in the way of itself. I think it could have been really easy to waste time with the One Wish Willow's origins, and I'm so glad that they didn't even bother. The supernatural elements of this movie, despite existing, barely hold any importance to the themes presented. It's really this cautionary tale, critiquing modern men, dating culture, and has opened up an avenue to have more mature discussions about shitty abusive behaviors that aren't just physical. Can we talk about the performance in this movie? I mean, holy shit. Indy Navarrete is a star and is absolutely going to be considered one of the most memorable performances of 2026. She had so much fun with this character and really mastered the weird unpredictability of her. Watching her seamlessly switch between Wish Nikki and Real Nikki, or Wish Nikki (calm) to Wish Nikki (freaky) was utterly amazing. Her performance always kept you guessing and really built up tension as the story progressed. I love how she managed to toe this line of the uncanny, expressing it through her movements. Obviously, there's a certain level of editing that bolsters these movements as they played around with speeds and stuff, but she still just has this strange uncanniness to her, especially in the bedroom scene. I love how you can just make out her features, seeing that it's not quite right. Michael Johnston also deserves his flowers for the role of Bear. It's much more of a counter to Indy's performance. He plays it rather grounded and leaves the big emotional outbursts until shit hits the fan. He still ought to be credited for his earlier, subtler work in the film. He made Bear feel like a real guy that we might know. His reactions to what Indy was doing bolstered her performance overall as well. From what I've heard in interviews, Indy kept her plans pretty close to her chest and didn't really allow Michael to see Nikki until shooting, so a good chunk of his reactions feel genuine. I also think people ought to give a big hand to Cory Barker, not just for making the damn thing, but for also actually giving the project the proper care that it deserves. Learning that he was the one to edit it means so much to me. He's applying his creative abilities to give viewers the exact experience intended. It's also been lovely to hear the cast talking about the freedom they were given to pitch things on Obsession. I think had Cory not listened to some ideas like Bear's suicide change, the response to the movie could have turned out entirely differently. It also seems like he really hasn't been getting in anyone's way when it comes to talking about the movie. You've got actors, gaffers, programmers, composers, fucking costume designers all coming forward to talk about their experience of the movie, and it's wonderful. It really highlights all the hard work that goes into making art and shows off even the tiniest of details that the viewers otherwise wouldn't have thought about. The lighting in this movie is terrific. The use of shadows are incredible and it makes for some beautiful shots. Nicki's terror is concealed in darkness, giving the movie this incredibly unique look. I love this shot of her standing at Bear's door. This tiny twinkle of light is so cool. The score for this movie is genuinely one of my favorite parts about it. Rock Burwell really showed up from fucking nowhere to drop this incredible score. It really deserves its own listen just to hear the little details that made some of the scenes even more fantastic. The praise the score has received is just so lovely. Soundtracks are probably one of my favorite parts of the filmmaking process as they can really make or break a project. My friend has been sending me these little TikToks of Obsession's costume designer Blair James talking about her choices with outfits. There are so many incredible details that I absolutely never would have picked up on if not for her highlighting her ideas. Like the fact that a lot of Nicki's outfits take on a little bit of Sarah's style to steal Bear's attention. Costumes always feel a little hit or miss, and I'm so glad to see that Blair's been given the opportunity to talk about her intentions behind the outfits. For actual critiques of the film, I have two. Well, one nitpick take that might not even have any validity, and one real critique. I guess I'll nitpick first. So, in the first half of the movie, there's this one part where Nikki shows Bear an AI meme. I know it's stupid, but I really hope that this wasn't actually AI. I haven't really been able to find any reliable sources definitively confirming whether or not an artist recreated the art style, despite a lot of people insisting someone did. I don't really expect they'd actually use AI for the movie, given the people behind it clearly care about the art they're making, and also like, some of them are SAG affiliated, so it would be a bit strange given the SAG strikes from a couple years ago, but I still thought to bring it up. On to my actual critique, and this is one I've heard people talk about a lot. Why the fuck did Ian rock up at the end of the movie? It felt so strange for him to just show up to Bear's house. I understand that Nikki was like intentionally luring him there, but my issue comes from what he says. He literally talks about getting $1 billion as if Bear wasn't right in front of him when he made the wish. It kind of feels like they just wanted to up the kill count at the end of the movie and just threw him in there to die. Sure, it ups the intensity of that scene, but I think Sarah's fucking corpse and Nikki's bloody face was enough for tension. Also, can we talk about how good the billionaire scene is? Like, not only is the score for it fucking perfect, but Michael Johnston's gut-wrenching no as Ian makes the wish is so fucking good. The actual deeper stuff is probably the best part of it. It's the perfect karma for Bear. After getting everything he's wanted for the entire movie, he no longer has control. It's the perfect comeuppance for his character, as it forces him to actually stand up and face the consequences of his actions, which he ultimately can't even commit to in the end. God, it's just so good. And that was Obsession. The ending is truly one of my favorite endings ever. It stays true to its characters, it's intense, it's horrific, and it's just fucking crazy. Bravo, Curry. This took a lot more effort to write than I initially expected, and has probably been the most drafted and chained script I've ever fucking written. I felt like every time I was ready to put this project down, a new idea popped into my head. Obviously, I didn't cover everything, because like, that just gets redundant if I keep lingering on the same stuff. I expect this will probably be the only Obsession video I ever make, and I feel pretty happy with it. If somehow you were insane enough to watch this entire thing without having seen the movie, please go and see the movie. I don't really give a fuck if it's like a normie take or whatever, but I'm truly obsessed with this movie, and it's probably gonna end up being my favorite of the year. Anyways, thank you for your time, and thank you for watching. Bye.